Warning: the following story contains descriptions of graphic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Sleeper Cell 41. In today's episode, we're going on a journey into the dark and twisted world of the Ripper Crew, a group that terrorized Illinois with their heinous crimes. Prepare to delve into the minds of serial killers, cannibals, and necrophiles, where evil knows no bounds. The Ripper Crew, or the Chicago Rippers, was an organized crime group of serial killers, cannibals, rapists, and necrophiles. The group composed of Robin Gecht and 3 associates, Edward Spratzer and brothers Andrew and Thomas Kokorellis. They were suspected in the murders of 17 women in Illinois in 1981 and 82, as well as the unrelated fatal shooting of a man in a random drive-by shooting. According to one of the detectives who investigated the case, Gecht made Manson look like a Boy Scout. This is the case of the Ripper Crew. It was the case with all the grisly drama of a Hollywood production. A serial slayer, predictably dubbed Jack the Ripper by newsmen, was stalking young women in Chicago and environs, discarding their mutilated corpses like so much cast-off rubbish. Homicide detectives had no inkling of the killer's motive or identity. They couldn't even manage to agree upon body count. The speculation published daily in Chicago's press was bad enough. The truth, when finally exposed, was infinitely worse. On May 23, 1981, 28-year-old Linda Sutton was abducted by persons unknown from Elmhurst, a Chicago suburb. 10 days later, her mutilated body, the left breast missing, was recovered from a field in Villa Park, adjacent to the Rip Van Winkle Motel. The evidence suggested Sutton had been kidnapped by a sadist, but police had nothing in the way of solid clues. A year would pass before the next acknowledged victim in the series disappeared. On May 15, 1982, 21-year-old Lorraine Borowski was scheduled to open the Elmhurst Realtor's office where she worked. Employees turning up for work that morning found the office locked. Borowski's shoes and scattered contents from her handbag strewn outside the door. Police were called at once, but 5 more months elapsed before her corpse was found, on October 10th in the cemetery south of Villa Park. Advanced decomposition left the cause of death a mystery. 2 weeks later, on May 29th, Shui Mock was reported missing from Hanover Park in Cook County. Her mutilated body recovered at Barrington on September, taking the police nowhere. By August 28th, when teenage hooker Sandra Delaware was found stabbed and strangled to death on the bank of the Chicago River, her left breast neatly amputated. Rose Davis, age 30, was in identical condition when police found her corpse in a Chicago alley on September 8th. 3 days later, 42-year-old Carol Pappas, wife of Chicago Cubs pitcher, vanished without a trace from a department store in nearby Wheaton, Illinois. Detectives got the break that they had been waiting for on October 6th. That morning, prostitute Beverly Washington, age 20, was found nude and savaged beside a Chicago railroad track. Her left breast had been severed, the right deeply slashed, but she was breathing. An emergency treatment would save her life. Hours later, in a seemingly unrelated incident, drug dealer Rafael Tirado was killed, a male companion wounded, when occupants of a cruising van peppered their phone booth with rifle fire. 2 weeks later, on October 20th, police arrested unemployed carpenter Robin Gecht, age 28, and charged him with the cruel assault on Beverly Washington. Also suspected of slashing prostitute Cynthia Smith before she escaped from his van, Gecht was an odd character. Once accused of molesting his own younger sister, authorities immediately linked him with the Ripper slayings, but they had no proof, and he made bail on October 26th. Meanwhile, detectives had learned that Gecht was one of 4 men who rented adjoining rooms at Villa Park's Rip Van Winkle Motel several months before Linda Sutton was murdered nearby. The manager remembered them as party animals, frequently bringing women to their rooms, and he surprised investigators with one further bit of information. The men had been some kind of cultists, perhaps devil worshippers. 2 of the Rip Van Winkle tenants, brothers Thomas and Andrew Kokorellis, had been kind enough to leave a forwarding address for any mail they might receive. Police found 23-year-old Thomas at home when they called, and his inconsistent answers earned him a trip downtown. The suspect promptly failed a polygraph examination, cracking under stiff interrogation to describe the satanic chapel in Gecht's upstairs bedroom, where captive women were tortured with knives and ice picks, gang raped, and finally sacrificed to Satan by members of a tiny cult, including Gecht, the Cocorellis brothers, and 23-year-old Edward Spritzer. As described by the prisoner, cultic rituals included severing one or both breasts with a thin wire garrote, each celebrant taking communion by eating a piece before the relic was consigned to Gecht's trophy box. At one point, Cocorellis told detectives he had counted 15 breasts inside the box. Some other victims had been murdered at the Rip Van Winkle, out in Villa Park. He picked a snapshot of Lorraine Borowski as a woman he had picked up with his brother for a one-way ride to the motel. Police had heard enough. Armed with search and arrest warrants, they swept up Robert Gecht, Ed Spritzer, and 20-year-old Andrew Cocorellis on November 5th, lodging them in jail under $1 million bond. A search of Gecht's apartment revealed the satanic chapel described by Tom Cocorellis, and the lawman came away with a rifle matched to the recent Toronto shooting. Satanic literature was also retrieved from the apartment occupied by Andrew Cocorellis. With their suspects in custody, authorities speculated that the gang might have murdered 18 women in as many months. Tom Cocorellis was charged with the slaying of Lorraine Borowski on November 12th, formally indicted by a grand jury 4 days later. Brother Andrew and Edward Spritzer were charged on November 14th with rape and murder of victim Rose Davis. When the mangled body of 22-year-old Susan Baker was found on November 16th at a site where previous victims had been discarded, police were worried that other cult members might still be at large. No charges were filed in that case. However, the authorities now connect Baker's death with her background of drug and prostitution arrests in several states. Facing multiple charges of attempted murder, rape, and aggravated battery, Robin Gecht was found mentally competent for trial on March 2, 1983. His trial opened on September 20th, and Gecht took the witness stand the next day. Confessing the attack on Beverly, Washington, convicted on all counts, he received a sentence of 120 years in prison. Tom Cocorellis had suffered a change of heart since confessing the murder. Attorneys seeking to block the reading of his statements in forthcoming trials, but on December 4th, 1983, the confessions were admitted in evidence. Meanwhile, on April 2nd, 1984, Ed Spritzer pled guilty on 4 counts of murder, including victims Davis, Delaware, Mock, and Toronto. Sentenced to life on each count, he received additional time on conviction for charges of rape, deviant sexual assault, and attempted murder. Tom Cocorellis was convicted of Lorraine Borowski's murder on May 18, 1984. While awaiting sentencing, he led police to a field where Carol Pappas was allegedly buried, and searchers could find no remains. On September 7th, the killer's helpful attitude was rewarded with a sentence of life imprisonment. 18 days later, Cocorellis and his brother Ed Spritzer were indicted for the murder of Linda Sutton. Andrew Cocorellis and Spritzer were also named in a second indictment covering the murder of Lorraine Borowski. On February 6, 1985, a statement from Andrew Cocorellis was read to the jury in his trial for the Davis murder. In his confession, the defendant admitted he was cruising with fellow cultists, Gecht and Spritzer, when they kidnapped Davis, with Andrew stabbing her several times in the process. Convicted on February 11th, he received his life sentence on March 18th. Cocorellis was executed by lethal injection on March 16, 1999. A year later, on March 4, 1986, Edward Spritzer was convicted of murdering Linda Sutton, formally sentenced to death on March 20th. Authorities declared that Spritzer had agreed to testify against Gecht. Thomas Cocorellis' rape conviction was reversed, and he won a new trial on his murder conviction. Rather than face a retrial, Thomas pleaded guilty to Borowski's murder in exchange for a 70-year sentence. Charges in the murder of Linda Sutton were dismissed as part of the plea agreement. Thomas was scheduled to be paroled on September 30th, 2017, but was denied release after he failed to find an approved place to live. He was released from prison on March 29th, 2019. As of June 30th, 2019, Thomas lives at Wayside Cross Ministries at 215 East New York Street in Aurora, Illinois. In an interview with WBBM TV, Thomas proclaimed his innocence, saying, "Everybody thinks I'm a monster. I'm not a monster." At the time of his arrest, Thomas Kokorelis was a painter with no criminal record. He was described as having a borderline range of intellect with an IQ of 75. For more content, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.